They took over $25,000 from me in 5 years. But it was my daughter's 5th birthday party they truly stole. They stole her joy, her faith in the people who were supposed to love her. And they did it with a coordinated, deafening silence. 17 people, my parents, my siblings, my aunts and uncles, all confirmed they would be there, and not one showed up. That silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was the bomb that detonated my entire life. But what they failed to realize is that from those ashes, I would build an empire of my own. And the price of entry to my new world would be exactly $1. The single dollar I sent them when I finally said no. Before that silence, my life was a chaotic symphony of obligations. I was Elena, the reliable one. I was the 3 a.m. ride from the bar, the cosigner for the car loan, the "can you spot me 100" that was never alone. I was the family's financial and emotional shock absorber, wearing their constant crises like a badge of honor, stupidly believing that every thank you was a deposit of love, not just another withdrawal. I existed in a state of low-grade perpetual anxiety. My phone was never on silent. My bank account was always just a little emptier than it should have been. I was perpetually available to solve problems that were never mine, all because I thought this was the definition of being a good daughter. This party for Lily, this was supposed to be mine. It was for my daughter, the one good thing I had. For months I worked double shifts, the smell of industrial cleaner and stale coffee clinging to my hair when I'd get home to kiss her goodnight. I saved every single dollar, my fingers cramping at night as I hand-tied tiny ribbons on 17 goodie bags. I practiced baking the 3-tiered castle cake twice, my small kitchen perpetually dusted in a film of flour and pink food coloring. This was more than a party. It was a physical manifestation of my love for her, a fortress of joy I was building with my own exhausted hands. I just wanted her to feel, for one day, like the entire world revolved around her. The RSVPs were so bright, so enthusiastic. 17 of them. "Can't wait, Elena. Lily is going to be so excited," my sister texted. "Your father and I wouldn't miss it for the world. We're so proud of you," my mother said, her voice dripping with that manufactured warmth I mistook for affection. I saved every message. I read them at night, a collection of promises that anchored me. I was so proud. I thought I was finally doing something right enough, good enough, for all of Inem to gather. I bought 20 pounds of pork. I hung streamers until my arms ached. The house looked like a fairy tale, and when I saw Lily's face, bright with pure anticipation, I thought, this is it. This is happiness. The party was set for 2 p.m. At 2:15, Lily was at the front window, her little princess dress pristine, her plastic tiara perched on her head. "Are they lost, Mommy?" she asked, her voice a little wobble of excitement. I forced a laugh, a tight, high-pitched sound. "They're just running late, baby. You know how traffic is." I checked my phone. Nothing. Just the read receipt on the group chat message I'd sent that morning. "See you all soon." At 2:45, the perfect buttercream on the castle cake began to sweat in the warm room. The ice in the coolers was just water. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the tick-tick-tick of the kitchen clock and the Disney soundtrack playing to an empty room. It was 3:30 p.m. The food was cold. The helium balloons had begun to droop, their strings puddling on the floor. My smile felt like it was cracking my face. My optimism had curdled into a sick, cold dread. I started sending individual texts. "Everything okay?" To my mother. "Are you close?" To my father. "Hey, where are you?" To my sister. To my brother. 17 messages. 17 delivered notifications. 17 blue read receipts. And not one single reply. It wasn't traffic. It wasn't a car accident. It was a decision. It was a coordinated, silent, unified decision. They weren't coming. They had all decided, together, that my daughter's heart was not worth an afternoon of their time. The cruelty was surgical. It was an execution. The moment it all shattered, it wasn't a scream from me. It was a whimper. From Lily. She finally turned away from the window, her little shoulders slumped in her princess dress. She looked at the castle cake. She looked at the 17 empty chairs I had set up. She looked at the untouched mountain of presents in the corner. And then she looked up at me, her eyes filling with a deep, bottomless confusion that I knew, in that instant, would harden into a core memory of rejection. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Did I do something bad? Is that why nobody came?" I grabbed her as she sobbed. burying her face in my shirt. I felt the vibration of her tiny grief, and my own pain evaporated, replaced by a pure, cold, clarifying rage. The next few days were a blur of cold pizza and Disney movies. I couldn't bring myself to take down the decorations. The happy 5th birthday banner hung over the living room like a cruel joke. I just held Lily. I let her sleep in my bed, her small body curled against mine. I tried to pour every ounce of my own life force into the void they had created in her. The silence from my family continued. It was absolute. It was as if 17 people had simply vanished from the earth. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunting the scene of the crime. The smell of stale cake and refrigerated pork filled the house, the physical proof of my profound, colossal stupidity. I was grieving, but it wasn't a death. It was a murder. An entire week. 7 days of that suffocating, calculated silence. Then, my phone pinged. A text message. It was from my mother. My heart did a stupid, hopeful leap. An apology? An explanation? A catastrophic family emergency? I opened it. It was not an apology. It was a demand. Elena, your cousin is getting engaged. We are all chipping in for the gift. I need $800 from you by Friday. And then, the line that broke me. Family needs to support each other. No mention of the party. No, how is Lily? Just the casual, cheerful, brutal entitlement of a tyrant. Family needs to support each other. I read the words over and over. The room went very cold. They hadn't just abandoned us. They were rubbing it in our faces. My fingers felt detached, like they belonged to someone else. I opened my banking app. $800. It was my rent money. It was Lily's preschool tuition for the month. It was the grocery budget for the next 3 weeks. It was a sum meant to break me, to force me back into line, to remind me of my function. I typed in the transfer amount, but I didn't type 800. I typed $1. $1. I added a memo, just 3 words. Will pass. I hit send. The whoosh of the transfer was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a drawbridge being raised. It was the sound of a chain snapping. It was the sound of the first match being struck. It took less than 60 seconds. My phone didn't just vibrate. It convulsed, as if possessed by a legion of demons. A flood of notifications from numbers that had been silent for a week. Group chats I'd been excluded from suddenly resurrected me, just so they could crucify me. I was petty. I was jealous. I was toxic. How dare I, after all they had done for me? My sister called me a bitch. My uncle accused me of disrespecting my parents. My mother sent a barrage of unhinged voice notes, her voice cracking with performative tears, claiming I was the one tearing the family apart over a silly party and a little bit of money. The gaslighting was instantaneous, a rabid, coordinated assault. I was no longer the victim. I was the villain. The digital assault was just the appetizer. 3 days later, there was a knock on my door. Not a polite tap, but a heavy, authoritative pounding that rattled the frame and made my heart jump into my throat. I looked through the peephole. My father, and standing next to him, a uniformed police officer. My blood turned to ice. My father, the self-righteous enforcer, stood there with his arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He had called the police. On me. He was telling the officer in a loud, booming voice that I had been making criminal threats, that he and my mother were in fear for their lives. This was it. This was my public humiliation. My rock bottom wasn't the empty party. It was this. My own father, using the law as a weapon to silence me. The officer, a man with tired, patient eyes, looked from my father's enraged face to me, trembling in the doorway. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm. "I need to see these threats." My father proudly presented his phone. The officer read the $1 transfer notification. He read the memo. Will pass. He scrolled up, seeing my mother's $800 demand. He looked at me. "Is that the full context?" My voice was thick, but it was steady. They all skipped my daughter's 5th birthday party last week. 17 of them. No calls, no texts. Then she sent that. The officer's entire demeanor changed. He handed the phone back to my father. "Sir, this is a family dispute, not a criminal matter. You are wasting police resources. Do not contact her again if she doesn't want to be contacted." He turned to me, just before leaving, and his voice was softer. "Ma'am," he said, "document everything." He left. My father stood on my porch, sputtering. his face purple with a rage that had nowhere to go. The authority he had brought with him, the blue uniform, had just walked away. He looked small, powerless. I just looked at him. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt nothing. A vast, cold, empty nothing where my fear of him used to live. I closed the door in his face, the click of the deadbolt echoing in the hallway. That officer was my unexpected mentor. He didn't just dismiss my father. He gave me a roadmap. Document everything. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. It was the moment I stopped being a victim and became an investigator. That night, after Lily was asleep, I didn't watch TV. I went to my desk. I pulled out the dusty file box from the back of the closet. I logged into my online banking. I started with 1 year, then 2, then 5. I cross-referenced every bank statement with 5 years of text messages and chat logs. Hey, Elena. Car broke down. Need $300. Elena, power bill is late. Can you cover $150? Elena, just need $500 for a deposit. I'll pay you back next month. Over and over and over. From my mother, my father, my siblings, my cousins. A constant dripping tap of financial vampirism that I had mistaken for love. I stayed up all night. The sun was starting to tint the sky a sickly gray when I finally finished. I had drawn 2 columns on a yellow legal pad. Loaned and repaid. The repaid column was almost empty, save for a random $20 someone had sent me 3 years ago with a thanks. The loaned column. I had to double-check the math, my hand shaking so hard I could barely hold the pen. It wasn't a few thousand. It was $25,347. $25,347 in 5 years. I felt sick. The physical sensation of nausea was so strong I had to run to the bathroom and heave. It wasn't generosity. It was an extraction. I had been funding their lives while working overtime to buy my own daughter a birthday cake. The money was damning, but the messages were the murder weapon. I kept digging, scrolling back, finding the chats I'd been conveniently left out of. A chat between my mother and my aunt from a year prior. Don't worry about the cruise payment, my mother wrote. I'll just tell Elena the boiler is broken. She'll send the money. She always does. Another one, from my brother to my sister. Just ask Elena. She's a total pushover. Tell her it's for school books. They weren't just taking. They were conspiring. They were boasting. They were laughing at me. The image of me as the reliable one shattered and was replaced by the truth. I was the fool. I printed everything. Every bank statement with a highlighted transfer. Every manipulative text message. Every bragging, conniving chat log. I put it all in a thick 3-ring binder. The binder was heavy. It felt like the heaviest thing I had ever held. This wasn't a collection of memories. It was an affidavit. It was my resignation letter from the role of dutiful daughter. It was my new identity. I was no longer the people pleaser. I was the one who had the receipts. The cold, hard evidence transformed my grief into something solid, something tangible. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a 5-year campaign of calculated, systemic, emotional, and financial abuse. The binder changed my posture. I stopped hunching, as if waiting for the next blow. I started walking with purpose. My first move wasn't emotional. It was practical. I took all the money I had in savings, the money I was supposed to send my mother, and I opened a new bank account at a different bank, a high-yield savings account that they did not have the details for. I set up automatic transfers. I cut my budget to the bone. No more takeout. No more subscriptions. Every single cent I saved was a brick in my new wall. The taste of cheap, bitter instant coffee and instant noodles became the taste of my freedom. I picked up more shifts. I started a side hustle cleaning offices on the weekends. Lily came with me. She would sit in the corner of a quiet, empty corporate boardroom, drawing in her coloring book, while I scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans. The sharp chemical smell of bleach and floor wax became the scent of our survival. It was grueling. My hands were raw and cracked. My back ached constantly. There were nights I'd fall asleep in my clothes, too tired to even shower. But every dollar I earned that wasn't siphoned away felt like a victory. It was my money. It was Lily's future. It was untouchable. We were alone, but we weren't lonely. The absence of their constant manufactured drama was like a weight lifting from my chest. My phone was quiet. It was a beautiful, peaceful quiet. I started taking Lily to the park on Saturdays instead of dragging her to obligatory toxic family dinners. We met other parents, other kids. I made a friend, Sarah, another single mom from the park. We'd trade babysitting. We'd complain about work over coffee. It was normal. It was a simple, uncomplicated connection that didn't demand a pound of my flesh. I was building a new family, one based on mutual respect, not parasitic obligation. The physical work was hard, but the psychological work was brutal. I started therapy. I found a low-cost online service. I would sit in my car during my 30-minute lunch break, the engine off, talking to a stranger on a screen, unpacking decades of manipulation. I had to learn to separate love from obligation. I had to kill the voice in my head, my mother's voice, that screamed I was selfish for having boundaries. I learned that no is a complete sentence. I learned that my self-worth was not a stock to be traded for their conditional approval. I learned to grieve the family I wished I had, and to accept the one I actually had. The past intruded, as it always does. My mother, realizing her financial line was cut, tried a new, insidious tactic. She tried to bypass me. I came home from work to find Lily talking to a new friend on her kid's gaming tablet. It was my mother. She had somehow gotten my sister's kid to add her as a friend. She was in my daughter's ear, asking her if Mommy was still being mean, asking her to tell Mommy to call Grandma. A cold, surgical rage, clearer than any I'd ever felt, descended on me. She had crossed the final, unbreakable line. She was trying to poison my child against me. That was the end. The absolute end. The next morning, I took the binder of evidence to a lawyer. I used my emergency savings to pay the retainer. I didn't want to sue them. I didn't want their money. I wanted them gone. The lawyer drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It was beautiful. It was cold, professional, and terrifying. It cited the 25,347. It cited the harassment. It cited the documented attempt to circumvent a parent to contact a minor child. It stated that any further contact, direct or indirect, would be met with immediate legal action and a restraining order. I didn't just mail the letter. I sent it via registered mail to all 17 of them. I informed Lily's school and her daycare, giving them photographs and a printed list of names of people who were not authorized to pick her up, ever. I explained the situation to the principal, who looked at me with sad, understanding eyes and assured me Lily was safe there. And then, I did the last part. I sat down with my phone. I opened my contacts, and one by one I blocked them. My mother, my father, my sister, my brother, aunts, uncles, cousins. 17 numbers. Block, block, block. With every press of the button, I felt a physical lightness, as if I was cutting a new, invisible anchor string. And then, silence. But this time, it was my silence. It was a silence I had built, a silence I controlled. It was the sound of my boundaries holding firm. The first few weeks I'd check my blocked messages folder. It was full of vitriol, prayers, curses, and desperate pleas. You'll regret this. How can you do this to your own mother? You are dead to us. But the messages couldn't reach me. They were just ghosts rattling at a locked gate. After a month, they stopped. The silence became absolute. It was peaceful. It was the sound of my new life beginning. Our first Thanksgiving alone was strange. The air felt thin. There was no screaming, no passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, no drunk uncle starting a political fight. It was just me and Lily. We made a small chicken instead of a turkey. We ate on the couch, watching a movie. Lily fell asleep on my lap, her stomach full, her face peaceful. I looked at her, at the safety of our small, warm apartment, and I realized I wasn't missing anything. I was safe. She was safe. The crushing weight of expectation, the obligation to perform, was gone. I could finally, truly, breathe. The next year was about building. I got a promotion at my office job, the one I'd started after quitting the cleaning gig. My manager said she was impressed by my meticulous documentation and no-nonsense attitude. I laughed. If she only knew. I had a small, solid savings account. I was contributing to a retirement fund. My life was no longer a 5-alarm fire I was constantly trying to put out. It was a small, well-tended garden. I wasn't thriving in spite of them. I was thriving because of their absence. I changed. My physical appearance changed. I stopped wearing the drab, baggy clothes I used to use to hide, to make myself smaller. I cut my hair into a sharp, efficient bob. I started running, not to lose weight, but to feel my own strength. I'd feel the pavement pounding under my feet, the burn in my lungs, and it was my pain, a pain I chose, a pain that was making me stronger. I was no longer a pushover. I was no longer reliable. I was formidable. I was a fortress. And the only person with the key was my daughter. I worried about Lily. I worried that the trauma of that party would define her, would teach her that she wasn't worthy of being shown up for. I got her into play therapy. We talked. I never lied to her. I told her, in terms she could understand, that Mommy's family wasn't very kind, and that it's my job to protect you from people who aren't kind, even if they're family. She was resilient. She made new friends. She stopped asking about her grandparents. She just knew that her world was small, but it was 100% safe. Her laughter was no longer tinged with the anxiety of a child who has to perform for conditional love. One day, I was cleaning out my closet and found a box. It was full of old family photos. Me at Christmas. My mother holding me as a baby. My father teaching me to ride a bike. I felt a pang, a sharp, quick sting of grief for the idea of them. But then I looked closer. I saw my mother's tight, forced smile. I saw my father's proprietary hand on my shoulder. I didn't see love. I saw ownership. I didn't burn the photos. That felt too dramatic, too emotional. I just put them back in the box, taped it shut, and put it in the storage unit. They weren't my family anymore. They were artifacts. They were history. The cease and desist letter had worked like a charm. It had terrified them. The cold, legal language, the specific mention of the 25,347, the explicit threat of a restraining order. It had shown them that the rules of the game had changed. I was no longer playing their game of emotional blackmail. I was playing a new one. It was called Consequences, and I had the documentation to win. The silence they had used as a weapon against me was now the shield I used to protect myself. The silence was finally mine. About a year after I sent the letters, the truth about why my family was so volatile finally came out, and it didn't come from me. It came from my cousin, the one whose engagement party my mother had demanded $800 for. She reached out to me on a social media platform I had forgotten to block her on. She was furious. It turned out my mother hadn't just been collecting for the gift. She had been overcharging all the siblings and aunts, claiming the venue and catering cost thousands more than it did, so she could secretly use the extra cash to fund the cousin's honeymoon. She got caught. The entire family alliance, built on a rickety foundation of shared lies and manipulations, imploded. The message from my cousin was a novel of rage. My mother and father were now outcasts themselves, accused of stealing from their own family. My aunts were apparently suing my mother. My sister and brother, who had been my mother's loyal lieutenants, were now being audited by the rest of the family, who rightly suspected they had been in on the scam. The parasitic entity had turned on itself. The vipers were eating each other. I read the long, frantic message, and I felt nothing. Not joy, not vindication, just a quiet, tired validation. Of course they did. This is who they are. I replied, I'm sorry to hear that. I wish you well. And then I blocked her too. The implosion sent them scurrying, like rats from a sinking ship, looking for a new host. The first to try the gate was my younger sister. She called me from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was a wreck. She was sobbing, hysterical. Elena, you were right. You were right about everything. Mom took money from me too. I'm ruined. I can't make rent. She cried, and I waited. I knew what was coming. Elena, can you just help me this one time? I swear I'll pay you back. Just $500? Please? It was the same script, the same manipulation, just with a different target. I held the phone to my ear, and I looked around my quiet, peaceful apartment. I could hear Lily humming in her room, playing with her dolls. I could smell the dinner I was cooking, chicken and herbs, not cheap noodles. This was the life I had built. This was the peace I had earned with my own raw hands. My sister's sobs were the sound of the outside storm, the chaos I had escaped. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said, and my voice was calm. It was steady. It was a voice she didn't recognize. But no, I can't help you. She sputtered. But we're family. I replied, no, we're not anymore. And I hung up the phone. The moment I disconnected the call, I expected to feel something. Guilt, regret, a flicker of that old, stupid, conditioned sense of obligation. But there was nothing. There was only peace. A deep, profound, bone-deep peace. It was the climax of my war. And it wasn't a battlefield explosion. It was a quiet click. It was the definitive, final no. I had not just refused to give her money. I had refused to let her dump her chaos into my world. I had refused to set myself on fire to keep her warm. I had protected my peace. I had protected my daughter. I had finally protected myself. A few weeks later, my father tried. It was an email. It was a different tactic. Not rage, not pity, but a weak attempt at patriarchal authority. Elena, this has gone on long enough. Your mother is sick. I knew from my cousin she was fine, just stressed from being sued. It's your duty as a daughter to put this foolishness behind you and come home. We are willing to forgive you for your disrespect. Forgive me. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a trap, a lure to pull me back into the performance. I read the email, marveled at the sheer, unbroken narcissism, and then I marked it as spam. I didn't even bother to reply. The final ghost was my mother. She was the most desperate. She sent a package to my apartment, a birthday card for Lily, a year late. Inside was a $20 bill and a long, rambling 2-page letter. It was a masterpiece of non-apology. I'm so sorry you felt abandoned. I never meant to hurt you. It's just that I have so much pressure on me. Don't let your pride keep you from your family. It was all about her feelings, her intentions, her pain. My daughter's tears, the empty room, the melted cake. None of it rated a specific mention. I put the $20 bill in the charity jar on my counter. I shredded the letter. It wasn't an apology. It was an invoice. People talk about forgiveness as if it's the final, necessary step to healing. For me, it wasn't. Forgiveness implies that what they did is excusable, that there's a path back. There isn't. Forgiveness for me would have been a lie. It would have been a betrayal of myself and of my daughter. My healing wasn't found in forgiving them. My healing was found in accepting the truth. They are incapable of change, and I am not obligated to be their victim. My vindication was not in their downfall, but in my indifference to it. I didn't need to forgive them to be free. I just needed to leave. The 1-year anniversary of the party arrived. It was Lily's 6th birthday. I was nervous all morning. My stomach was in knots. But this time, the house wasn't silent. It was filled with noise. My friend Sarah and her son were there. 2 other families from Lily's school came. There were only 8 of us. We had a simple store-bought cake. We played messy games. We laughed. Lily, surrounded by her friends, her chosen family, was radiant. She blew out her 6 candles, and as I watched her, I realized my hands weren't shaking. I wasn't waiting for a text. I wasn't anticipating betrayal. I was just present. My life is good. It's not a dramatic, movie-perfect life. It's a real, stable, quiet life. I am still in therapy. I am financially stable. I am a present, protected mother. My relationship with Lily is the strongest thing in my world, built on a foundation of absolute trust and safety. She knows I am her shield. I know she is my why. We have our routines. We have our inside jokes. We have our little, safe, 2-person fortress. It's a life built from the ashes, and it's more solid than any house I ever lived in before. They tried to make me an outcast, but they ended up making me an individual. They tried to expel me from their toxic kingdom, but they ended up liberating me. The greatest, most profound cruelty they ever inflicted on me, that silent, empty room, was the very thing that forced me to build a life where I would never again be dependent on their validation. They thought my worth was tied to my generosity, my function as their daughter. But I learned that my worth is inherent. It's not something they can grant, and it's certainly not something they can take away. I hear things sometimes, glimpses from the outside world. My father's gambling debts are public record now. My sister, after I refused her, apparently moved in with an equally toxic boyfriend. My mother and father are in a legal battle with my aunts over my grandmother's will. Their world is a perpetual, screaming vortex of debt, drama, and dysfunction. It's the same chaos they always lived in. But now, they have no one to clean it up. They have no one to blame but each other. And they have no one to loan them $800. I heard their old house, the one I grew up in, is in foreclosure. I felt a brief, distant sadness, like hearing about a childhood friend you haven't seen in 20 years. It's a shame, but it has nothing to do with me. My old life, my innocence, my daughter's biological family, all of that is gone. It was the price I had to pay, but what I got in return was my self-respect. What I got in return was my child's well-being, and I would make that trade again, every single time. My new life is my vindication, and the silence I've learned is beautiful.